Podcast. 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 Yeah, welcome to another episode of the Racer X Exhaust Podcast. I'm Jason Wygant. Cry Me a River edition of this show. Yes, I know you do not want to hear two guys who have been paid for a long time to go to motocross and supercross races and hobnob with the top athletes complain about their jobs. So we're going to try to do it in very measured tones. But this particular episode I think is interesting from a human standpoint. My old buddy Simon Cudby, and I mean old, it's 20 years now since I first stayed at Simon Cudby's house. He was really cool to me when I first went to California for the first time in my professional life back in early 2002, right around this time, April, May. Actually, it was May because I was going to the Glen Helen National. We had a phone call at the Racer X office. This is the story. Somebody calls Davey and says, "Hey, anyone want to go to California and ride for a few days?" Davey yells downstairs where I worked, and he's like, "Hey, Wygant, you ever been to California before and ridden there?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Okay, you're going." This company called Motocross Vacations was hosting like a 3-day, you get to ride the famous tracks of Southern California, and then you get to go to the Glen Helen National. So they invited me as a journalist to do a magazine story on it. Cool thing is, the other guys who were on the trip, I met these dudes from South Carolina, these three guys, still friends with them to this day. They're good buddies with Randy Richardson, the FMIP, our buddy from Michelin. They were on that trip, still friends with them to this day. Then, after I'd already planned the trip, we get another phone call in the office that says Gary and David Bailey will be hosting a riding school the week after Glen Helen. So Davey's like, "Do you want to cover that too?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I had accommodations to the Motocross Vacations folks for a few days. Then there was a national, and I think Racer X got me a room. I don't remember. Then I had like 2 or 3 more days in California to do this Bailey riding school. So Simon's like, "Dude, you can borrow my bike and you can stay at my house." It's pretty awesome. And I had basically only met Simon right then. So he had no reason to do that. He was already established as probably the premier photographer in the game, one of the most important people in the motocross media game. I had been a member of the industry really as a full-time guy for about 6 months. So I don't know why he was being this helpful, but he was. And as I kind of moved through the ranks at Racer X, eventually it was like I'd see Simon at the races as a photographer. Then eventually we were collaborating on projects as kind of leaders of the thing. And then honestly, things started to change. I became more of a boss, and he was an employee that, I had to get the most out of. And Simon, as you'll hear in this podcast, after doing this photography thing for a long, long time, I think was trying to figure out a way out. But that wasn't really working because the media game, if anything, you have to do more as the years go by. So if you're Simon, you're a photographer who was once shooting for a magazine that came out 12 times a year, then you're shooting for a website, then we add video, then we add social media. Next thing you know, you've got to do 4 to 5 times the amount of work you used to do, but you're not going to ever get paid 4 to 5 times more than you used to. I mean, it's just how it works. Like, I'm doing this podcast now. I didn't do this podcast 15 years ago. It just adds, right? And it can drag you down after a while. And eventually, Simon and I, we went from a very, very good relationship and hanging out all the time to occasionally having some arguments. Like, how are we going to solve these problems where we're being asked to do a lot more than we used to, and we're never going to get paid double or triple or 5 times as much? It's just, again, cry me a river. It's just the way media works these days in anything. It just is what it is. So Simon eventually found a different, and for him, better pathway. And he's still heavily involved in what we do with his photography company now, Align, which is him and several others working together to provide us photos at Racer X. And the same thing for the industry clients, right? So if you shoot for us and you also say shoot for, in Simon's case, Honda and KTM, they're also asking for way more than they were 20 years ago because they have social media and they have websites and they have video needs that they didn't used to have as well. So how do you balance all that? And how does Simon go from heavily burned out, I don't want to fly anymore, I don't want to leave my family anymore, but I still love motorcycles? How do I keep that joy and keep my job? The answer for him, adventure bikes. Now, after this pod, I was talking to Simon. He's like, "Man, I really didn't want to talk too much about being burned out on going to the races." Because again, he knows, just like I'm saying, that any of you watching this or listening to this are thinking like, "Bro, that would be like winning the lottery to be able to do this for a living. How could you be complaining?" All I can chalk it up to is you just got to walk a mile in someone's shoes. Going to the airport every Friday for 20 years, it can wear you out. You just work with me on that. Don't roll your eyes, and otherwise listen to a really fascinating story of how adventure bikes have helped turn things around for Simon Cudby. And it's cool to see him as happy as I think I've ever seen him in his professional life. That's really cool to see that for a friend that you've known for 20 years. But before we get to the pod, of course, we shout out our sponsors, including Yoshimura. Simon's tight with the Yoshimura guys. Our buddy Big E, mutual friends there. Yoshimura-RND.com, you know it. Their exhaust system was going to be mounted on a Supercross championship bike of Jet Lawrence. It was just a matter of what race was he going to clinch. Didn't happen in Atlanta. It did happen now at Foxborough. So another championship for Yoshimura. They've been doing it in the 250 ranks for a long time, back with the Geico Honda team. And now 2 championships with Jet Lawrence, motocross and supercross. Go to Yoshimura-RD.com for more on their exhaust system. Get them for your bike, not just Hondas, for pretty much anything. Also, our podcast brought to you by Leatt. When it comes to choosing a riding kit, a quality pair of boots is one thing that you should definitely invest in. They're key points of contact to your bike, so it's essential that your feet, as well as your ankles and shins, stay comfortable and protected. It's the Leatt 5.5 Flex Lock boot, a 3-year project with long-term development and testing using pro athletes from all over the world, and RacerX's very own Chris Kiefer. Designed with outstanding comfort and grip optimization, with unique features like the auto-locking one-way sliding closure for a great seal at the top of the boot. And Leatt's adjustable flex lock system reduces forces to the ankle by up to 37% and to the knee by 35% by locking out ankle movement when overflexed, giving you that feeling of security. Available in 4 colorways, as well as a new Enduro version and an additional 2 colorways, all for just $399.99. Compare that to high-end boots from most manufacturers. $399.99 is a bargain. Also, the podcast here brought to you by OnTrack Schools, the K-12 distance learning school for students who are always on the go. Chase your dreams, blaze your trails with nothing holding you back. There are no limits to what you can do when the classroom is where you make it. OnTrack School meets you where you are with a flexible, personalized education that happens at your own pace. Pursue your dreams and your education with OnTrack. After the episode, head over to ontrackschool.com and use the code RX22 for $100 off your registration fee. That's with OnTrack School. Now let's chat with our boy, Simon Cudby. All right, here we are. I have not talked to Simon Cudby in the longest time. We no longer work on parallel tracks. I mean, we kind of do behind the scenes, but we'd see each other on track walk every couple of weekends for 20 some years. But you hit me up last week and showed me some awesome photos of another great locale you're riding at. And this made me think, I'm like, wait, you're doing what everybody thinks about. What if we got out of this rat race and just hopped on a darn motorcycle and saw the world? Simon Cudby, that's what you're doing these days.
Yeah, I think I've cracked it. You know,
Yeah.
everyone wants to go travel and see the world, and I just happen to be fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time. And now I've got this thing called Off-Road Underground, and I'm traveling around shooting different locations, different bikes and products for various brands. And I don't know, man, it's the first year in my life, I really think, and this sounds pretty bad, but it's the first year in my life where I've gone, man, I love my job right now, you know? So it's been good.
Wow. And look, I know everyone would say if they see Off-Road Underground and they see your images and they see where you're riding, it seems obvious that you would love it. But I'm sure it's a lot more work, as always, than it
Yeah.
looks. This time,
Oh,
though, the work is so fun, I guess it outweighs it.
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, once you're out there doing it, I mean, I've always been like, okay, I want these clients that I'm working for to be really happy with what we do. You know, I'm not just sort of fudging it along. So
Yeah.
as serious as I used to take my supercross photography and the travel and all that stuff, I'm doing the same thing now with this sort of adventure bike dual sport thing that I've got going, and it's working out good. I mean, I came back from Greece last week or 10 days ago, and it took me like 29 hours to get home, and I was just fried for about 4 days. So it's like that feeling you get, you know what it's like when you come back from a supercross and you get to the track at 8 in the morning, and then you don't get to bed until 3 a.m. the next day, and you've got to get up at 6:25 to go to the airport, you know? So
Yes. And that
takes,
whole 24-hour span, almost that 24-hour workday, you're firing the whole time. You're never tired that whole time. You're
yeah,
on that adrenaline, or you just got to get it done. And then yes, afterwards,
yeah,
that's when it gets you.
yeah, definitely. It takes a few days to recover.
So yeah, let's get into your metamorphosis here. Now, for people who don't remember, that would be ridiculous, but maybe people don't always look at the bylines. I mean, Simon, I'm gonna say you're probably the most prominent photographer, at least these days in the industry, maybe ever. And we knew you from the races for a long, long time, and you're still there every once in a while. But give me an idea of basically how long you were a supercross motocross guy, because I know you had a background even before that. How many years were you on this grind?
Well, I started shooting for AXO. My first Supercross was 1996 in Orlando, and I didn't know anyone. I mean, I'd met the guys from AXO, Jim Hale and John Caper and those guys, and they're like, "Hey, let's," because I was shooting for GT Bicycles at the time, and they were selling AXO BMX gear, and I connected with the AXO guys and Todd Huffman. You know Todd
Oh
Huffman.
yeah, yeah.
He was the marketing guy at GT, and he's like, "Hey, AXO guys, you should use Simon." And all of a sudden, I was shooting Supercross, and I didn't go to every round between then and now, but that's when I started. And then I think I went to every round in 2009. And I was like, man, I'm never doing that again. That's crazy. And then I did it again for 4 or 5 years after that. And
Yeah, okay. You weren't going to every round, but let's be honest. You went to a ton of races, and then behind the scenes, you're doing a ton of shoots. So from 96, how long was it till like, this is full time? I got to chase every dollar. I got to chase every client. How many years was it before you were in as deep and 7 days a week like most of us?
yeah, I mean, I was shooting for GT from 95 through about 99. And I'd been to some races off and on over the few years. Then I met Eric Johnson at San Diego Supercross, and he was, one of the founders or editors of Racer X back in the day. And I'm kind of introvert, and I kind of keep myself to myself. And I've always felt like I was an outsider there, and I might practice at San Diego, and I see this guy, this blonde guy that I'd seen around a little bit before. And I'm like, I don't even know who that guy is. And I went over and said, "Hey, what's up?" And started talking to him. And he's like, "Hey, you should send some of your stuff to us at Racer X." And I sent some stuff over there, and I got a practice shot of McGrath on the cover of Racer X, and that was it, And then obviously I met Davey and you guys, and so since '99, I would say I've been sort of focused on motocross and less on the mountain bike side.
Yeah, and it's not just races. I mean, look, the majority, I would say, can we say that for a long span, the majority of team shoots from their autograph stock to things like that, there was plenty of during the week stuff outside of the racetrack you're doing also.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go to the races at the weekends, but it wasn't like I came home and put my feet up on a Monday morning. I had a lot of stuff going midweek, and I was gradually just starting. I was still shooting some mountain bike stuff with various people, and still shooting for AXO and Mechanics Wear Gloves and Renthal, and those, that was all sort of the same group back then. And then I think what really kind of ramped up a bit was in 1996. I went to you guys at Racer X and was like, "Hey, let's do this video thing," because video was starting to take off. So
yeah, wait, 96 or 2006?
2006.
2006. Okay. Yes.
Do you want me to say
no,
that
we're
again?
good. We're good.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, not 96. We were just talking about 96. 2006.
Yes.
We decided to start this Racer X Films thing as the video thing was ramping up and everyone was getting online more and more. And
yeah,
I can remember shooting practice at Hangtown, the first video I did, and I was with Davey and Eric from Racer X, and I was editing. We got back from the track after practice, and I'm at the hotel from 4 o'clock till about midnight trying to edit a 2-minute video because everything was much slower back then, computers and upload speed, and you had to reformat everything. So it was pretty difficult back then to do that stuff. And I had just like a little handheld camera. But as I realized the quality of that needed to improve dramatically, that was starting to take up a lot of my midweek stuff, going to test tracks and shooting bike intros and all that kind of stuff when I wasn't at the races every weekend,
But what's cool is, look, I always say the two jobs that I know more people that ask about that they wish they could do is being a mechanic and being a photographer. The racing thing, everybody knows you either have it or you don't. Everyone would love to be a racer, but everyone pretty much knows by the time they're an adult if they're going to make it or not. So it's like, then everybody starts looking for the other path. And I swear it's mechanics and photographers the most. So look, there is a cool glory thing. Like eventually you became like as insider as it gets, like the guys that you were probably having dinner with and hanging out with and saying hi at the test tracks with. It's what most fans would probably dream of. You're as inside could get.
Yeah, I mean, if I was to look back, I mean, I was never into motorcycles or motocross or anything back before 1995, let's say. So I didn't grow up riding. I didn't really follow anything. And so I was never kind of like a fanboy, I was like, it was work for me. And
Yeah.
I actually shot with Jeremy McGrath for GT Bikes back, I think, 94. And I didn't know who he was, you know, and they GT used to do a ad in the Supercross program every year with their bikes, and Jeremy standing there figuring out which bike he's going to ride. And so I didn't know who he was. And then I did it the next year, and I knew who he was. I'm like, man, I had no idea. And we were laughing about it. It was pretty cool. And then, you know, I had dealt with a lot of professional athletes in the cycling industry, and you know, I kind of realized if you don't take yourself too seriously and you make it easy for them, there's no drama, you know. So I kind of moved that into the motorcycle industry, and yeah, I got some really good friends. And you know, I forget that the guys that I know are also these incredibly talented riders, and that, you know, and superstars in other people's eyes. And when I'm working, I just don't really think about that, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like what you eventually it just becomes normal. And I feel like your side benefits even more. I always say what I have to do, we have to report good and bad news. So sometimes we say great things about them and sometimes we don't. I feel like your job is you're basically just making them look good all the time. So I feel like for the most part, everybody loved Cudby. If Cudby was around, this is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. And you know, actually when Instagram sort of started up, Brian Staley was the editor at Racer X, I think about 2011 or 2012. He called me and he's like, hey, there's this thing called Instagram. We need you to send photos from the race. And I know you and I back then, we had only just really started doing race reports the same night, you know, and that was like, oh my God, so much work.
Yes.
And like, it's morphed into this insane Instagram feeding frenzy now, you know. And but I started doing Instagram, and I was posting stuff, and then I'd send Ryan Dungey and Villapoto and Ken Roxon and all these guys photos, and they would tag me. And all of a sudden, you know, Instagram back then, it was way easier to grow how many followers you had. And sort of just because I was sending photos to those guys and they were posting them and tagging me, all of a sudden I got a pretty big following on Instagram. So yeah, that seemed to work out pretty well.
Yeah, and a lot of it is that relationship you have with them. I cannot imagine the treasure trove of inside gossip stories that you have heard and you know. And look, you're just a photographer, right? So they're not thinking you're going to write some story about it or go on a podcast to talk about it. You probably have as many inside background gnarly stories as anyone in the industry.
Yeah, I mean,
that black hat of yours.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely you know, the industry's small enough where, you know, if you go off and, you know, say you post a photo of someone that's not flattering, or you know, it's a compromising photo, you're not going to their, you know, like Ricky Carmichael when he crashed back in 02 or 03. And I mean, the guy had a hole in the back of his leg from the exhaust, like a size of a quarter and about an inch deep. And he's crawling across the dirt in Florida by himself at his test track. I was doing a Fox photo shoot back then, and he ended in the whoops, and it didn't end well. And you know, Jeannie, Ricky's mom, came out, and she was going to drive him to the hospital, and she's like, we're not going to talk about this, are we? I was like, nope. So you know, so then I was, all of a sudden, you know, we were friends back then, but then I was kind of on the inside because then they trusted me not to share what had happened, you know.
Yeah, that always goes a long way. Oh, and the other thing is you're doing all these photo shoots, and I'm sure there's tons of paperwork as far as like this image can't be seen at this time until this sponsor is off the team and this sponsor is on the team. That must go on all the time also.
Oh, definitely. I mean, even up to this day, it's even more stringent. I mean, I've had a good relationship with KTM, Husky, Gas guys, and also Honda. And one of my good friends, Ken Vericki, was doing the Honda PR and posters and all that kind of stuff back when I first started shooting poster stuff. And he was kind of like, okay, these are our photos. You can't share them with anyone. And I was like, okay, no problem. And ever since then, I've, you know, never shared stuff until I've been given the green light by whoever I was working for, you know. And that's the same thing as the Ricky Carmichael crash, you know. You do it one time and you're out, you know. So you have to abide by the rules and toe the line, you know.
Have there been some where, not that you messed up though, like someone else messed something, like, hey, we're good now, and then it actually wasn't, and then photo's gonna be taken down or photoshopped? I'm sure, dude, 20 years, it has to have happened.
Yeah, well, like I just said, there's some stuff where you can't talk about.
Exactly, but it does happen.
Yeah, oh, for sure,
Yeah.
and um, you've had stuff where stuff's actually gone out, and then they're like, "Oh, we changed the sponsor or
Hmm.
something," and or you do a team shoot and the jersey doesn't have the right logo somewhere, and you
Right.
know, so then those original photos you've shot, they can't go anywhere even after it's all been approved, because they still have the wrong logo on. So
You have to
somebody
redo the whole thing.
or
The
somebody has
photos?
to Photoshop,
Oh,
um, that say I'm shooting for KTM and there's the wrong logo, for example,
yep.
hypothetically, and
Yep.
somebody will Photoshop those, and those are the official ones they release, and then I might get them from them if I want to share them, but I can't share the original actual photos. And I did a shoot actually for Butler Brothers a few years ago, and it was Blake Baggett was on the team, and I think Benny Bloss, and when we shoot these team shoots, we bring out lighting, and it's a lot of work to make these things look really good. So we shot for 3/4 of the day,
Yep.
and then Forrest Butler was like, "Well, just in case this doesn't happen, let's just shoot a handful of extras." So we,
Okay.
we we went out and didn't bring the lights out. We just banged off a few photos for half an hour, and that was it. Well, they ended up using those photos and not the really good ones. So I have like Blake Baggett whipping it and with mountains in the background that nobody's ever going to see.
That's right. And that's what I'm getting at. Look, your relationship is as good as anyone's going to have. And I think everybody in general likes you being there because, like I said, you're going to make them look good. But even that still brings some stress with it. Even though you're as welcome can get, there's stressors built into that job as well.
Oh, for sure. And, like for example, when we did a KTM shoot or the Honda shoot,
Yeah.
we're shooting for Honda plus all these other sponsors. So
Right.
the last Honda shoot, it was pretty hectic. We spent 2/3 of the day shooting static photos. Okay, hold this bottle. Okay, hold this helmet. Hold this
Yeah.
goggle. You know, because those sponsors get to use all those photos. So there becomes a pretty big laundry list before the guys even get on their bikes and start riding, and we do the action photos.
Actually, this makes me think of a question. Look, by nature, okay, you're an artist, right? You're a photographer, right? And also do videos. Really, though, organization sounds like it becomes one of the most important parts of the job. Did you ever think of that as a strength of yours? Because it must have had to become one to do all this.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about the races I went to, I had to be extremely organized. I had a list of clients I was shooting for. I wanted to make sure everyone was happy.
Yeah.
I renamed all the images. So on the flight on the way home, while all the mechanics and the team guys are asleep, I'm working, and then I work
Yep.
when I get home. But you mentioned earlier about like everyone wanting to do the photography job. I mean, it's definitely hard work. If you get to the level where you're like, okay, I can do this for a living. I'm a professional. I'm actually making money doing it.
Yeah.
Um, it's very, you have to work really hard to do that. But you mentioned mechanics. Those are the guys I would not want that job, because
No.
those guys
No.
those guys work probably harder than we do at the races, and then all week, and then back on the plane, and then they're framing out bikes in hotel parking lots, and I mean, it's just incredible the workload those guys do. And then they build up a practically brand new bike every weekend, and every time the rider gets on it, it gets hammered, and they've got to start from scratch. So it's like you never seem to get ahead.
Oh yeah. And if look, not even if they mess up, if something goes wrong with the bike, I mean,
Yeah.
they got that stress on their shoulders all
Oh
day long,
yeah.
and it might not even be from them. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even think about, I did think about that one time recently. It's like those guys have got a lot of responsibility, because their riders are hitting 70-foot triples, and you don't want anything to break on the bike, and you don't really see that much anymore. But I'm sure it's stressful.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, the day before one of these team shoots, where you must have a gigantic list of you have to do all this, and by the way, you got one day to get this right, because the last thing I'm sure Honda wants to do is take Ken Roxon out of a test day
Yeah.
again because the photographer messed up. I mean,
Yeah.
that had to be pretty stressful. Like the night before, like we got to get this done, and I cannot get a second chance.
Yeah. It's definitely stressful, but somehow I've managed to not really think about it, and I just do
Okay.
it. And just because if I think about it, then I'll get stressed out.
All right.
So I mean, I definitely know, like those mornings at 6:30 in the morning when you're driving to the KTM track, and you're like, okay, we've got a big day ahead of us, and
Yeah.
just get on with it. And all of a sudden it's 5:30 in the evening, and you're done shooting. And then I've had a lot of back-to-back team shoots especially this last year. And so then I get home and then I'm editing photos and uploading photos because I have the gas shoot the next day or the husky shoot the next day. So, you got to get it done because they're waiting for the photos too. So, all of a sudden it's you're going to bed at 11 o'clock and getting up at 5 again and back in your truck and going out, and I'm lucky enough, like Spencer Owens is a local guy here in California. He's a great photographer and he's really helped me a lot over the last few years with photo assisting, and he's become a great photographer in his own right. So I'm lucky to have his help. He lives local. I can leave equipment at his house when I'm not here, and it's been good.
Okay, so yeah, so that thing, you go from going to an occasional Supercross race, not even knowing who McGrath is, to now you're in super deep. And then you mentioned a great point. The race coverage has stepped up to such a ridiculous degree. Like I remember when you figured out some way to get your phone or your camera to talk to your iPad to get the stuff uploaded. Like, dude, we used to do stuff on Monday. Like Monday
Yeah.
was fast.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, Saturday becomes 3 a.m. You have to pretty much be done with everything Saturday
Yeah.
night, not Monday morning. When did it start to hit you like, man, this has gone from like really cool and a job and maybe a dream job for some to like this just isn't really that fun anymore? Like, do you know when that started to hit you?
I talked to KTM at the end of 2012 because I wasn't going to every race at that point. I was going to some, and I talked to Florian, who was the marketing guy here. He's now global VP of marketing, I think is his title. So, and we're friends to this day. And I went to meet him, and we ended up making this deal about going to the races. And previous to that, Christy Lacurel was marketing person at KTM at the same time. Anyway, I asked Christy, I'm like, hey, do you want race photos? What can I do to shoot race photos with you? She's like, well, you're going to every round, right? And I was like, sure. So that's when it sort of started. And obviously I've had a great relationship with Racer X since day one, and that was always my priority at the races, was making sure that Racer X was handled because they were the reason I was there. But working with Davey, he's like, hey, you can go shoot other stuff. Well, so I did. So all of a sudden I had a bunch of clients, and as social media ramped up, I think 2013, it really started to take off. And like you say, I'd figured out this deal of getting my camera to communicate with my iPad so that when Dungey goes across and does a fist pump over the finish line, 20 seconds later, it's on the Racer X page. Back then I would just post directly to the page, and, Dungey wins Toronto Supercross, and that was it, and it was there. And I always remember I talked to you or Davey, and you're like, maybe Davey, I don't think those guys were at a certain race, and they were in Morgantown in West Virginia at the bar watching it on TV, and then their phone, they're like, wait, it just happened. How did that happen? And
yes.
So the fact that I did that was cool, but then it piled a bunch of stress on me because, then you start doing it for a lot of different people throughout the day, and sometimes the Wi-Fi is not working, or you've got a cable not connected right, or there's some kind of glitch, and it became quite stressful. And it was good financially. I'm like, okay, I offer this service too. And initially people didn't want to, it wasn't like an extra thing because Instagram wasn't really much of a thing back then.
Right.
But over the years, it became the thing. And, we sort of renegotiated with some people and to provide that service. And it's been really good. But I think I can remember my last race I went to full time was Ironman in 2016, I think. And it's been, what's that, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
6 years ago. And I was like, man, I just can't anymore. I was just so mentally fried. And at that time I had connected with Rich Shepherd, who was a great photographer. And Rich and I had been hanging out for a year or two at the races, and we'd always sit together and talk and that. And he could see that I was on a downward trajectory.
Oh yeah.
mentally with going to the races. So he's like, hey man, let's do something together. So we struck a deal, and I went to some of the races with him, and he covered the rest of the races himself. And then a few years later, we hooked up with Mike Emery as well, and Cole Beach is on board now so we kind of formed this Align Media thing a couple of years ago. And there's a group of us that work together, and those guys are doing most of the work. And I've sort of gradually stepped back, but I still have great relationships with KTM Group and Honda and various sponsors. And yeah, it's worked out good. And that sort of transitioned me into what I'm doing these days.
Yeah, yeah, you've moved into the off-road world. So yeah, if people might not realize this, folks probably see Align Media all over our website and all over our Instagram for Racer X. And that doesn't mean you're out. It's just a group now of you, and I still see you every once in a while. You're still shooting stuff.
Yeah.
You'll still go to races. So yeah, if anyone's wondering, Simon Cudby is still involved with Racer X. It's just now under this collective group instead of just your name on everything.
Yeah, and I am still involved in the video stuff you see,
Yep.
Spencer and I moved from California to Idaho
hmm
for another project, and I connected with Spencer Owens, who I was talking about earlier, to produce his video stuff. So we sort of collaborate on that and shoot bike test videos and all that kind of stuff. And then, out of the blue, Davey Coombs from Racer X will be like, "Hey, what about this? Let's do this," and we'll do a fun project, which is like back when Racer X started.
Yes.
Some stuff that wasn't so race oriented. It might involve a racer. So I'm going to talk to Davey about doing some stuff maybe with like Grant Langston and like Damon Bradshaw's in Idaho, and maybe we could go ride with him, that kind of stuff, which shows another side to motorcycling outside of the stadiums or the motocross track.
Yeah, okay. So that's the thing. You're an artist. I would think part of the problem is, right, when we just had a magazine and it was 6 issues a year at one point, then it was 12. We weren't so in the rat race of there's a race every 7 days and we have to get 3,000 photos from each race. There probably was more time to do those lifestyle things. And by the way, doesn't it just get boring for you to shoot the darn start and the finish line 30 weekends in a row instead of, hey, this would be cool. Hey, that would be cool. Does that contribute to the burnout?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was like that Bill Murray film, Groundhog Day. It's like, you walk in, you see the same people, you say hi, and not saying anything about the racing itself or the racers, because I mean, it's, I love racing. I love car racing. I love motorcycle racing. I think it's amazing. But when you're in the trenches, I was focused more on delivering quality images and workflow and all this other stuff. So I actually didn't get to enjoy the races.
Right.
And it's pretty funny because 2022, I went to Anaheim 2 or 3, I think it was, as a spectator. So I was with the Max Steffens from Fly. He's like, "Hey, we got a suite. You want to come up there?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I was sitting in there with my brother-in-law here, and Davey came by the race or the Fly suite, and we had a beer and we're watching the racing, and it was like, "Oh man, this is awesome!" And I never got to see that while I was on the ground, and you're so focused on the photography and the look and what's in the background and who's here and what they're doing, and you just miss the whole point of the excitement of the races at a certain point.
Yeah, so okay, you're eventually burned down on that. And look, I mean, it's not like your job sucked by any means. We all know that we're lucky to be doing what we're doing, working in this industry, which is awesome.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I was so lucky to meet up with you guys and become a part of the Racer X family. And I've done a few podcasts over the years with other people, and I always say, I owe everything to Davey Coombs, Eric Johnson, the Coombs family, all you guys there for getting me going at the beginning. I was just in the right place at the right time, and I met the right people, and all of a sudden it worked out.
Okay, so here's what's cool. Okay, everybody, let's call it midlife crisis age, no matter what job they have, comes to like this point where they're like, man, is this really what I want to be doing in my life? Now, your job happens to be awesome. My job happens to be awesome, but we still get there. Racers have what we think is the greatest job ever. They get there at like age 25. They get to that point. So what everybody thinks is like, what if there was more? Okay, so first you had to figure out how to keep making a living. You couldn't just quit your job. And then you ended up doing what everybody wishes they could do, right? Let's ride a motorcycle in some exotic locale. When does this start forming as like, I could do this for a job, and by the way, it'd be fun and it would cure the burnout? How does this all start formulating?
I think 2016, I connected with a guy that was from the industry, and he was on a burnout too. Chris Glassbell, he was working for Jake Klingensmith at Creative Works ad agency, and they were doing all Suzuki stuff. So I'd worked with Chris over the years, and then he worked at Yoshimura, and then we were on a mountain bike ride. I'm like, "Hey, what about adventure bikes?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's cool." So all of a sudden we formulated a plan, and we started a digital publication, and I'm not with those guys anymore. And We kind of went our separate ways a few months ago, but I'm still heavily, that's my focus, is going on these trips and shooting photography, being able to actually ride a motorcycle in the motorcycle industry is quite tough these days, right?
That's true. Yep.
You get these people that want to get these jobs in the motor industry, then they don't ride their bikes anymore because they're too busy. So
yep.
I'm fortunate to be in the position I am. And yeah, so that was 2016. Here we are, 2022, running around doing stuff. I'm still doing team shoots with some of the brands, and some other photo shoots here and there. I do some stuff. Christy Lecurel, who I mentioned earlier, when she was at KTM, she's now doing marketing at Intense Cycles. So I do some photos with those guys and have a really good relationship with them. And ironically, I knew Jeff Stieber from Intense Cycles in 1993. I think we bumped into him on the trail up here in California, and he had this crazy suspension bike back then, and so I've known Jeff for, 30 years now.
Yeah, he's like the guru there at Intense. It's all from his brain. So did you? I don't even know this myself. Were you just thinking, I'm still motocross, supercross guy, I'm just gonna dabble in this adventure bike thing, or did you think like, no, this is a hard transition, or did it just kind of happen organically, as they say?
Yeah, it just kind of happened organically. I mean, I've been, I was stuck in this rut, to be honest. I was going to these races, and it was a fantastic job, and I had great relationships with everyone, and it was
you're getting
really
paid,
good.
so you can't just jump off. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually watched that series called The Long Way Round with Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor, where they ride adventure bikes around the world, and they've got a film crew following them, and it was really cool. And I'm like, man, I want to do that. There's so much more to see than the inside of an airplane or inside of a Avis rental car, or or the stadium. And because you go to the races and you're traveling, but you're not seeing anything because you're on such a tight deadline, and you got to get there, you got to get back. And that I wish I had spent a bit more time at these places I went to, but you just never had the time to do it because you had to get back because you had something else the next day.
Yeah. And by the way, family at home, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. My kids were little, and so I was lucky that when I was home midweek, if I wasn't shooting for anyone, I could take a day off here and a day off there. And then, when my kids were little, we'd go to the desert and ride motorcycles. And that was like some of my best memories of when my kids were small, go to Ocotillo Wells with a trailer and the dirt bikes and the dogs and just hang out. And that was amazing. So, and then actually I got to that same point as I got to sort of 2016. I had bought a KTM 1190 adventure bike, which is this huge, powerful dirt bike, really, and I bought it in 2015 from KTM. And whenever I went to ride that, like we did a Baja ride, probably Thanksgiving time 2015 with Todd Huffman and some guys, and they were all into adventure bikes. And we went to Baja, and I think Langers went with us, the graphic art director,
Racer X. Yep.
Yeah, Racer X. He went with us, and every time I rode those bikes, I'm like, man, this is special. Like this is so cool. We're out here in the middle of nowhere, and you've got the camaraderie of friends riding together, and it kind of taken that competitive. Up to that point, motorcycles were competitive, right? Racing and all that kind of stuff. Yes. Well, now I kind of took that out of the equation, and we were just riding for fun. And it was just, I don't know, it felt really special. So I'm like, I need to do more of this. And it gradually just transitioned into that,
And lucky you, right? That field, that segment of the industry has kind of blown up in that same time. The amount of interest in adventure bikes, 16 till now, has to be massive. How much has gone up?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm 56 now. So when I started riding, I was like 49 going on 50. And yeah, I used to go to the tracks when I was a bit younger, to Glen Helen or Parla or wherever, Elsinore.
Yep.
And ride and have fun. But as I got a little bit older, every time I went to the track, I was like, well, there's a jump over there that I'm not doing. I suck. So it's like, I'm like, I'd leave without a good feeling. And then every time I rode a dual sport or an adventure bike, I was like, yeah, this is fun. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone or myself. I can just ride and have fun. And it's like it's not like we putt along on those bikes. I mean, everyone's like going for it a little bit too. So
Yep.
you still can be competitive, but you're not. There's no trophies at the end or anything. You're just having fun.
Well, that's what has made that segment grow, because it's like what you just described is what like tens of thousands of motorcycle people like. I'm sure the majority of those adventure bike dual sport guys are guys that race motocross when they were 20 and 30, right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the
Yeah.
guys at Fox, like Mark Finley,
Hmm.
who is high up the food chain at Fox and does a lot of product development and marketing stuff. When I started riding off road stuff, he's like, "Oh man, I just bought a KTM 500. It's so fun." And
Yep.
I hear that from a lot of people, and yeah, I mean that. I think that he's at the same age as me, or maybe a bit younger, where he's like, I don't really want to go to the track anymore, but I still want to
Yep.
ride and get that excitement. And then when you get to be my age, all of a sudden your kids are grown up and out of school, and you have a bit more time, and maybe you have a bit more disposable income to okay, we're going to go to Baja for a week with a bunch of guys and ride.
Yeah.
You have time to do that now if you're lucky. And so it just sort of all sort of intersected at the right time, and I was happy to be on that wave.
So, give me I mean, you've done this going back to, I guess, 2017 or late 2016. You've been doing
Yeah.
this as your main focus. So you got a lot of stories here, but just give me some examples of some of the exotic places you've been to, whether it's cool scenery in the US, and then apparently you're just in Greece. So you've gone well beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, actually think about the US.
Hmm.
When I ride here and we go to these places, there's just so many incredible places in this country alone. If
Yeah.
you think about Utah or Washington State or Death Valley or all those places. So we're going to try and do some trips in the US this year. But so far this year, we went to Moab, Utah in January.
Yep.
We went to Baja in February. And when you live in Southern California, you're like, oh, Baja, it's just right there. But it's like this sort of magical place for, some guy in Norway to go to Baja would be incredible. We actually
I see.
we had a guy from Iceland join us in Baja this year, a guy that we've been on trips with in Iceland, and he was just blown away how much fun it was. But going back, I think, if I had to think about the most mental crazy trip we did, it was to India. So
Oh,
we flew into New Delhi, and I met up with my friend Chris from England, who I used to work with when I was 21, and
Yep.
he rides bikes too. And we met at New Delhi airport, and then the next day we flew to Srinagar, which is up in the north. It's in the Kashmir region, and that area was when I think it's the British in the 50s, they kind of segregated the area, and all of a sudden you've got Pakistan and India, and in the middle you've got Kashmir, and they both think they still own it. Anyway, we're flying into Srinagar airport. I'm looking out the window. I'm like, all these buildings are painted with camouflage. I'm like, what? It was like a war zone there. And you're coming out of the airport, and it's just like armored cars and machine guns, and I'm just like, oh, okay.
and you did not know that would be the case going in?
No, well, actually, a few weeks before, my wife's dad had sent me this State Department warning to avoid Srinagar, and I'm like, oh. My wife's like, is that where you're going? I was like, yeah.
Okay.
We're fine. We know people there. So
Oh, sure.
we had a guy there who
Okay.
his father-in-law works for WPS Fly.
Hmm.
So there was myself, Chris from England, Dale from WPS, and Bilal, who's the guy from India. And we took off into the Himalayas on these Royal Enfield Himalayan adventure bikes. And man, what a crazy trip. I mean, we're on this cliff road. It's like the most dangerous road in the world on YouTube. And we rode that on these bikes, and I did it. I'm scared of heights, and I did it. And then I look back now, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'd do that again.
You wouldn't do it again.
I don't know, man. It was sketchy. And then we got detoured, and we went over this other mountain pass. And if we'd have stayed on our original route to go over the next mountain pass, we'd have got stuck in this huge snowstorm. There was cars covered in snow, and we'd have been over there. So we lucked out that the road was closed, and we took a different way. And then
'Cause it would have been really bad.
yeah, it would have been bad. And then we're like, oh, we're good. We're almost finished. We just have to ride back into New Delhi now.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. Like the craziest traffic. It was 96 degrees and humid, and we had all this adventure gear on. We finally the closer we get into town, the more traffic there is.
Mhm.
And we end up literally gridlocked. And we've got our headsets on and we're talking. I'm like, man, we got to pull over and get some shade and get some drink. We found this shop front. We're on this high street and there's like donkeys and buses and just people just sitting there in this heat. I had already taken my helmet off. I had my t-shirt on. I had like my adventure pants rolled up and my boots undone. I'm just cooking. We end up in this shop front and they basically roll the door up and we were in there laying on the floor and everyone's just like staring at us like, what's wrong with these guys? But
Just cooked, just overheating.
cooked. Yeah. And then that same day, I get to the hotel at 6 o'clock and my flight's at 3 a.m. the next morning. So I just stay up. I go to the airport. Well, then they cancel the flight, come back out of the airport at like 8 in the morning the next day, sleep until 3. You know, it took me so long to get home. But yeah, as far, you know, if you think about everything that we did on the trip, just lucky to be here, to be honest. It was crazy.
Yeah. Just a trip you look back, you're like, because I didn't die, it was really exciting. But there was a chance I could have died.
Yeah, because and we were on these Royal Enfield bikes. I mean, Royal Enfield's huge in India, and they make this adventure bike called the Himalayan. It's 400 cc's. It's quite heavy. It's very utilitarian. We had them loaded down with bags. So I was thinking, actually, this is the perfect bike to ride this crazy cliff road because it doesn't have any power. You can't, you know, it's going to take, you know, it's a lot of time. You won't get whiskey throttle with it. There isn't any throttle, you know. So
no wheel spin.
yeah, for sure.
And then you said you were in Greece just recently, just got back?
Yeah, there's a company called Mystical Routes in Greece, and those guys are really neat, interesting guys, and they have KTM 690s and 790s, 890s that you could go over and do a tour with them. And if I go back a long time, I used to work on cruise ships in the Caribbean when I was like 18 or 19. I left England. It was like this crazy job. And anyway, I spent like 4 months in the Mediterranean on the ship. And I can remember leaning on the rail in a port in Greece and seeing guys ride motorcycles onto these ferries because there's all these islands around there, you know. And I was like, man, I want to do that one day. Well, I actually achieved my dream a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome.
Yeah, we went on a ferry from one part of the country across to this other peninsula, and we rode there. It was awesome. Yeah, it was great.
And you were not a motorcycle person at that time. Like the bridge to get to where you got to, you would have never even thought that was going to happen.
No, actually, I had ridden a motorcycle, this same ship that was on in the Mediterranean, and this is like 1985 summer or 1986. I would get off in Corfu, which is this Greek island, and there was a guy that rented motorcycles there. So I had like a Yamaha XT350 or they had a Honda XR250. And then one time, the only bike he had was an XR600. And I was like, oh. So I'm like riding around the country with a tank top and a backpack and shorts and shoes on and no helmet. Don't tell my mom and dad that. But, you know, that
only
was
good story because you didn't die.
Yeah, right. And that was kind of where I learned to ride a motorcycle, but I never grew up riding bikes. And then between then and 1994 or 95, I hadn't ridden ever again, you know.
It does impress me. So look, yes, like you said, it's not a competitive environment, but okay, you're riding technical stuff. How does it work on these rides? Like you can handle it. Like that's pretty impressive for someone that didn't grow up racing. I'm sure a lot of the people you're riding with did. Yeah. And it's not like you're just photographer, Simon. You're riding on these trips as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. All these trips, you know, I'm 50% of my bandwidth is used up for riding, and the other 50% is like I'm looking around for, we're gonna shoot over there, or let's stop here, okay, you know. And I'm looking ahead, but sometimes I'm like looking backwards too to see what's behind us and see what it looks like that way too. So yeah, it's definitely challenging. And at the same time, I'm carrying a backpack with a couple cameras and some lenses and a drone and a GoPro and all this stuff inside, plus tools for the bikes on, you know, in the bags on the bikes and that kind of stuff. So yes, it's a big deal to try and do these trips. You know, it sounds all, again, it's like going to races. It sounds glamorous, but there's definitely a work element to it for sure.
Yeah, but the riding is a little challenging, I would think.
Yeah, we went to just this weekend. There was an adventure fest thing in Mojave Desert, and I have a Husqvarna 701 Enduro right now, and I put like a rally tower, so it's got like a windshield and stuff, and a auxiliary fuel tank. So it's smaller than like a KTM 890 or a traditional bigger adventure bike, but it lets you ride in places now, for me especially, where, you know, 890 in the sand, KTM 890 adventure bike in the
Yeah.
sand, very difficult and challenging unless you're really good. And I ride with guys that are good. So I'm always the guy off the back who's dropping his bike. But now I've got my 701. I'm like, okay, I can do this now, you know? So I moved to Idaho about 3 years ago, and we still have connections here in California, and I come back all the time. But moving to Idaho, I'm like, oh yeah, I can ride dirt bikes, and I had some friends up there already.
Mhm.
Well, the first trip I went with them, it's like super narrow single track through the trees, and you
Yeah.
know, side hill stuff where there's a big drop off on one side. And I was like, I've never done that before. So
Yeah.
going there and riding with those guys, I feel like in the last 3 years I've become a better rider, you know, and just riding with guys that are much better. And the first time I went with them, we went for breakfast, and I'm looking around. I'm like, oh, I've got these guys covered because I ride a mountain bike, and I've ridden in the desert, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then they're just gone, you know. And we get to stop for lunch for a snack or something, and one guy's like, yeah, I used to race GNCC, and the other guy's like, yeah, I was on the 1994 ISDE team. And I'm like, I mean, you guys all used to race, and I've never done that, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You're like, I didn't ride motorcycles till I was like 40 years old
30,
or something.
yeah,
30.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny.
Um, the Idaho thing, I know your daughter actually moved there because she was working for Fly, or does she still work there, by the way? Still there?
Yeah, she works for Fly WPS. She's actually doing photography, and
Mhm.
it's pretty funny because I call her and she's like, oh, I'm going to Florida next week, and she actually worked with Matt Ware, who was a photographer at Racer X a long time ago, and
Yeah, you
Matt and
worked
I,
super closely with him, and now she does.
yeah, now she does. They work together, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to Florida. I'm like, oh, who are you shooting? She's like, oh, we're going to Alden's place to shoot Zach Osborne, and I'm like, that's cool, you know. So like when your daughter takes business from you, it kind of sucks, but I'm happy for her, you know.
That's hilarious.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, that's great. So the Idaho thing, obviously, that was cool. You moved there because she moved there, but was that also to just kind of also get out of that rat race, that industry 7 day a week rat race to get out of California?
Yeah, it's a lot different when I come back to California now because I'm not in that pressure cooker all the time, you know.
Yeah.
Back then, you know, I fly to the races, and then, oh, Tuesday we're going to the Cowie track to shoot this guy, or
Yeah.
Wednesday there's a bike intro, and so I was constantly driving from Orange County to Corona or Temecula or Glen Helen to shoot all these videos, and then get back. And you know, I was always tried to be the first guy to get my stuff done, so I put a lot of pressure on myself to get home, start editing, get it delivered,
Yeah.
so that you guys could get it on your website first. And that took its toll, and it was definitely challenging. So moving away from that to Idaho has been really great. And this summer we have a lot of plans to go and do stuff up there. You know, there's a lot of motorcycle people up there, and also doing other stuff like camping or kayaking or just hiking or riding your mountain bike in the hills. It's really good.
So give me the idea of the focus. It's hold up your sticker there of
Oh
your
yeah.
the thing you're doing. Just tell me what that is. And off-road underground. Off-road underground. Is it just trips? Does it have tech stuff? Does it have tips? What's the theme? So when people go to off-road underground, they know what they're looking for.
So if I step back a little bit, I've realized that I'm not a writer or anything like that, and
Mhm.
I don't want to get involved in starting another media company and trying to sell ads and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
My thing that I've been successful at over the years is doing photography.
Yep.
So Off-Road Underground's really just a placeholder for some of the content we do on these trips. But we're also going to start doing maybe some how-to stuff on adventure bikes, like how to change the oil on a 701, or hey, here's a behind-the-scenes video of the Husqvarna off-road race team, and we
Mhm.
talked to a guy about all the tips and tricks they do on his bike, you know, on one of the races bikes. But predominantly, it's just a place where, hey, here's a photo gallery of our trip to Greece, and that's it. I mean, we've connected with, you know, several tour companies and we tell them to, hey, you can use all this media that we shoot for your own promotion. And
Mhm.
we try and always get people to go and use those guys for their trips, like our friend Skuli, who's the guy from Iceland.
Mhm.
He has a company called Ride with Locals there, and it's an amazing trip. So if you ever want to go to Iceland, it's ridewithlocals.com. And then our buddy Jake down in Costa Rica, we went to ride with him a couple months ago, and they do everything from like hard enduro which is hard because we did it a couple of years ago, and we were just like, we don't. This is, going up a muddy single track in the jungle. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I want to go and see the beach. Can we go there?
Yeah.
But they also have adventure bikes, and that's Ultimate Rides CR. That's his company, and then the Mythical Routes guys in Greece. We connected with them, and yeah, it's been good. So these tours at the same time, we're producing content. Like Alpine Styles, for example, it wants to really push hard into the adventure segment. They already have gear,
Mhm.
but it's big in Europe, but in the US, it's not that big. So we're trying to produce content for them, and they can put it out on their social channels, for example. And we've connected with a few other brands too to do that same thing.
Right. So your business, you have Off-Road Underground. Is that offroadunderground.com? Is that where you
Yeah,
go?
that's right.
So
And
there's that, but then on the other side, you're still kind of doing what you used to do. People can see your front-facing stuff on Racer X at the races, but you
yeah,
have clients in the adventure market that you're working with to produce stuff for them too.
yeah, definitely. So I went to meet with KTM the other day, and it sounds like we're still going to be doing their team shoots for a few more years. And
Yep.
I'm going to get Rich Shepherd and Mike Emery more involved in that stuff too.
Mhm.
But the day-to-day nuts and bolts, if you want to call it that, of going to the races, Mike and Rich and Cole Beach are handling most of that stuff now, even though I still have relationships with all the clients and try it. If there's a problem, I'll help smooth it over. But that thing's kind of running itself now, and those guys are doing amazing work. I mean, I see the photography that the Align guys do, and I'm like, man, if they were around when I was doing it, I'd be like, man, this is tough.
It's a
These guys,
competition.
these guys are awesome. Yeah.
No, it is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. I mean, it's same thing like when you started doing stuff to your iPad. I mean, they're texting us photos 45 seconds after the heat race is over. We have Jet Lawrence photos on our phone to use for whatever we need. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
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 But what I was getting at with the go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yep. What I was getting at with the tips and tricks for adventure is I just feel like the market is exploding. It's relatively young, and a lot of new bikes are coming out and new technology all the time. Like there are motocross gurus out there. There's guys that have been doing motocross suspension for 30 years and building motors for 30 years. A lot of the information is already out there, and everybody's got a shop in their town that knows this. I feel like the adventure thing is so new, and the bikes keep new cool bikes keep coming out. Dude, the amount of miles you've logged and the amount of different bikes. You mentioned putting a rally windshield on your 701. There's probably not a lot of resources. You might have actually become a resource. I don't even know how much you realize you've actually become.
Yeah, I don't know. It's it's a whole nother world, to be honest. I mean, there's companies in the adventure and dual sport space that I have never come across before in this motocross and supercross industry. Like this rally tower is from these guys in Europe. It's called Rade Garage, RADE Garage, and they make this amazing carbon fiber rally tower thing with a clear windshield. And they figured out how to, like the 701 has the gas in the back and it has 3 gallons there. Well, they've also figured out how to replace the air filter under the seat with a smaller air filter, and then the space that's left over, they've got an auxiliary gas tank there. So now you can go a couple 100 miles with that bike. So that opens up a whole range of places you can go without worrying about getting gas. And then, I work with a bag company called Giant Loop, and they're out of Oregon. And sort of the adventure thing, it's a lot more sort of camping, mountain bike style stuff, and less moto supercross race oriented stuff, obviously. But like I say, there's a lot of companies I've done stuff with, but there's also other companies that are in both spaces, like Acerbis. They always send us fresh plastic for our bikes. They don't really make plastic for the bigger adventure bikes, but we're finding that I have an adventure bike in my garage, but I've also got a Husky 300 2-stroke and a Husky 501 dual sport with a plate on it. And Acerbis makes stuff for all those guys. And Maxima Oils, my buddy Randy is the art director, graphic designer with Maxima, and he's the guy I take on all the trips with me because he used to race and he's really good. So I'm always trying to keep up with him. But he's great as a photo model, if you want to call it that. So we went to Greece together and rode with the 2 brothers out there that have the tour company. And so there is a crossover. I do talk to people that from the moto space that are in the adventure dual sport thing, and I'm lucky enough to have a good reputation. And when I talk to people, I'm surprised about the number of people that kind of know who I am because of the moto supercross stuff that I've done in the past. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So it's kind of weird, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well,
very humbling.
they probably want campfire stories of like what was it like hanging out with Stu or RC or Chad
Yeah,
Reed. I
yeah.
mean, because you were there, you did hang out with those guys.
Well, I'm gonna drop some names now. We
Hit
did
it.
a ride last summer. We did a ride with Ricky Carmichael and
Mhm.
JH Leal, his manager,
Yep.
and Anthony Paggio and a few other guys. Where he's connected with Triumph Motorcycles, so we did this big ride in Idaho, and so I had some of my Ida bros, as I call them, help me
Yeah.
do a route for those guys. And the first day we were just like, oh, this is cool, and then we took them up into the mountains, and it was started to rain, and it's windy, and we're up on these overlooks on these fire lookouts, and it's just incredible. And
Mhm.
it's funny because Ricky got a front flat tire, and he's down, like, I've got this electric pump, and we're pumping it up, and we plugged the tire because it's tubeless on that bike, so it doesn't have a tube. You just plug it like a car tire.
Mhm.
And we're both kneeling there, and the wind's gushing, and we kind of just looked at each other, and we just smiled, like, man, look where we are. This is awesome, and because I have I go way back with him and those
Sure.
guys too. And then last summer, Chad Reed with his Mountain Motorsports guys, they came to Idaho to ride, and we were on 300s. And man, we got into some stuff. There was a local guy, there's always that local guy that's like, yeah, I'll take you guys. And
Yeah.
his goal is to break you, so you're like way up there. And this guy was so classic. We got up on this big overlook, and everyone's like eating gel and power bars and whatever. And I'm like, man, I smell a cigar. Who's smoking a cigar? Well, the guy is like laying on a rock, smoking a cigar like this. I'm like, this guy's unbelievable. And then he's just ripping down the trail. You definitely
Ah.
meet some characters.
Oh, it's great. Well, there's the ultimate sign, right? You were so competitive for work purposes. Chad and Ricky so competitive for work purposes, and it's all gone away. Like there you
Yeah.
are on the side of the trail fixing a front flat in the rain, or
Yeah.
some guy smoking a cigar is
Yeah.
actually riding better than Chad
Yeah.
Reed, who's like one of the best motorcycle riders in the history of the world. It's crazy.
I got one other quick story about a rider too, and this guy is fantastic, and we all know him, Andrew Short. So
Mhm.
we took Andrew, I think that 2015 or 2016 ride that I was telling you about earlier.
Yeah.
Andrew's coach, Seiji,
Yep.
everyone knows him from the pits. Seiji was into adventure bikes, and I'm like, hey, we're going to Baja. Do you guys want to come? So they came to Baja with us, and Andrew was like, he's like, is it safe down there? Like, are we going to be okay? How is this going to be? Like, he was kind of nervous about going. Well, we took him down there, and he loved it. And then 3 months later, I think he signed with, I think it was Yamaha at the time, he was on Husky.
Husky
to do his first
rally.
to do his rally stuff. And all of a sudden he's in like Abu Dhabi testing with Husky or something. And I talked to him about that, and he goes, yeah, man, that when you took me to Baja, that really opened my eyes. I was like, really? So
Oh,
we inspired you to race rally or something. I mean, I'll take it as that, but I don't think it's really that. But the way he said it, I was like, oh, that's awesome. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Your story is like so many other people that own adventure bikes. It's the same thing. Now, maybe for you, it's hanging out with Andrew Short, Chad Reed, Ricky Carmichael, but that whole I used to do this. This is better for my lifestyle now. Is the story everybody that has those bikes tell. And how exciting is it that there's so many cool new bikes? I remember like 3 or 4 years ago, it's like this Africa Twin is coming out. Then, Yamaha's coming out with a Tenere or these 790, 890s. It's also such an exciting time for that. There's so like every 6 months, there's a new highly anticipated, completely different bike.
yeah, I mean, definitely. Even in the short time I've been in it, I've seen the progression of these bikes. The 1190 that I had, the KTM 1190, it was this giant bike, and the fuel tank was really wide, and the fuel was all up high. So you've got this like weight like this, so it wasn't, it didn't handle so well. Well, now with the 890 and 790, the gas is down low, makes a huge difference. And over the years, they've tuned the suspension for the more, if you want to say it, hardcore off-road guy, even though it's still a big bike. My buddy Quinn Cody is one of the R&D guys down at KTM, and we go ride with him. And the difference between the 1190 I had 6 years ago versus the 890, it's huge. Just the setup, they're so much more capable off-road now. So it's been good to see that development.
And Harley Davidson is even in on this. Have you seen that, ridden that? Anybody know ride that?
I have not actually ridden one. This festival thing this weekend I was at, they had a giant display, and they're all in on it. And my buddy Randy from Maxima, had gone to the product launch, and he's ridden that bike for probably 4 or 5 days now.
Yeah.
If you add up all the time, and he's like, man, that thing's really good. For me, it looks a bit funky. It's low and long, and I just don't know. But Randy's like, yeah, it's much better than everyone thought it would be. So yeah, props to those guys for doing that.
Yes, that's what I kept hearing. People keep using the word actually. It's actually good. Like
Yeah.
Harley hasn't had an off-road background. I mean, arguably ever, a little bit in the 70s, but even that was kind of a mashup. Yeah, everybody's like, it's surprisingly good. So that really shows you right there. That's how popular. If Harley Davidson is like, we got to invest serious money in that segment.
Yeah.
That segment must be blowing up.
And plus Triumph, Triumph has had adventure bikes for a long time, and now the sort of well-known rumor is that they're going to have a motocross bike and an enduro range of bikes. And I went to ride. Jeff Stanton has a tour company in Michigan that Davey from RacerX and I went to ride with Jeff Stanton, and he has Triumphs and he's connected with those guys. And just seeing the connection between the moto supercross guys and this sort of adventure community. Jeff Stanton's a smart guy. He knows that it's not about making money, but it's about showing people this other side of motorcycling, and the fact that you could go do that with Jeff Stanton or go ride with Destry Abbott or these sort of superstars from the industry, it's pretty cool. And I like Zach Osborne. He's always like, man, we got to do a trip. We got to go. I'm trying to get him to go to Iceland this year if he can make it, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Grant Langston.
Yep.
We took Grant Langston to Baja, and it's just like, it was classic. I mean, it was classic Grant Langston, 24 hours a day. And it was awesome.
Yeah. Knowing GL, like, dude, he's more into dual sport and adventure stuff than he is going to the motocross track now, just like everybody else.
There was a big sand whip section by this lake bed.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really hit sand whips on an adventure bike. And I said to Grant, I'm like, hey, I'm going to film this. Do you think you could double through these whips on this 890?
Yeah.
So I have a couple clips of him just like he's hitting them. But it just shows how capable those bikes are if you're really good. For the average guy like me, yeah, I'm lucky to get around on one. But you put them in the hands of Grant Langston, and all of a sudden they can do stuff that's you never thought they could do.
Yeah, that's really cool how far it's come. So look, we take all your years from dabbling in it in 96 all the way through 20 years to 2016 being in that grind. Now you're out of California. Now you're doing the adventure bike thing. And this is what you said, this year, you finally think you got it dialed in this year.
Yeah, it's taken a while, but this is the first year where I was like, man, I think I've got it made, because I've either had business partners or I would always dread going to Anaheim 1, because it's like the huge pressure, the pressure that the riders feel and the teams feel. I was feeling it too, because I'm like, okay, this is the first round of the year. I've got all these clients. I got to deliver, and then you realize you got to deliver every, week in, week out. And it was just draining a little bit, but now I'm like, man, I'm going to Arizona on Wednesday to ride dirt bikes for 4 or 5 days. And like I said earlier, it's still work in quotes. I mean, like I was so tired when I got back from Greece. I'm carrying a backpack for 5 days on a bike full of stuff. We're stopping all the time.
Yeah.
My head hurts here from taking my helmet off and on 40 times a day, it's, and not, you skip lunch and have a Cliff Bar or something, and, and get to, in Greece, one of the nights we got to the hotel at like 10 o'clock at night, we rode up this windy mountain road in the dark, following the tail light behind you. And it's, we definitely put the hours in on these trips.
It's a lot. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The last thing, how do you actually, are you the party pooper who has to be like, hey, stop riding, I need to set up photos now? Sorry guys, is that how you actually have to do that?
Yeah, so over the years I've learned, like, especially this year now, like this trip to Arizona, for example. So my buddy Randy's going, some of his friends are going, and one of his friends, Pete Postel, is like a sort of legendary off-road guy. And Pete's the guy that's like got the Google Maps, he's got the routes, he's got everything, he's got all the gear on his bike. He's a great guy. And I told Randy, I'm like, look, Pete knows, right, that we're going to be stopping and shooting photos. I'm relying on Pete to come up with this route. And I'm like, okay, we've got to go somewhere where there's some scenery or some cliffs or some, little canyons or trees, for
Hmm.
photos. And he's like, yeah, Pete's on it. So, but yeah, to answer your question, I'm the guy that's like, okay, let's stop here. But these guys know that going in when we do these trips now,
Yeah.
especially the guys in Greece, when we went with those guys, they need that. They need the content as well for their own usage. So they're more than willing to stop. And then I sent them a bunch of photos and they're like, oh man, these are great. We work really quickly. And I learned that from shooting with the pro guys at Supercross. They have a pretty short attention span, and you're like, okay, we got to get this done. And because they want to get back to training and testing.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. And I was talking to Mike Emery, one of your guys at Align, about this, probably even like last year. Um, when you train yourself to the finish of the race is coming up, and Villapoto or whoever it is going across the finish line, and you have one chance to get that shot. Once you've dealt with that environment, nothing is ever going to be difficult. That
Yeah.
is the hardest of the hard. You have one chance to get that shot, and if you miss it, you blew it. Everything's more relaxed than that.
Okay. So I speaking of like pressure cooker moments,
Yeah.
another Ricky Carmichael thing really quick. When he had switched to Honda,
Hmm.
and I had just switched to digital cameras. So I think it was probably like November 2003 or December 2003. You know more than me. That's when he switched to Honda, right?
It was going into '02, so it would have been end of '01, I think, when he's
Oh,
first riding a Honda.
yeah, I
Yeah.
ended up doing a photo. Oh,
Yeah.
it was when they first wanted to get him on the four stroke.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that might have
Yeah.
been then. Yeah. Yep.
So we're at the Honda test track,
Yep.
and I have to shoot photos. And I think he was going to be on the two stroke for these photos. Obviously, they hadn't really launched the four stroke yet. So we're out there, and he's riding the four stroke, and it's 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:15, 4:30. It's like, the test tracks in Corona. There's those mountains back over there, and
Yeah.
once the sun's gone, you're done.
Hmm.
I literally had 10 minutes to shoot photos of him because he's like, okay, I'm going to get on the two stroke now. And there was this perfect triple, and he just whipped it 20 times and we got the shots, but it's like, man, that's stressful because if I don't get the photos, they're not going to go, oh yeah, Ricky didn't, he was testing, so we didn't have time. They're going to go, where's the photos,
Yeah.
So
They're not going to yell at him. They're going to yell at you.
yeah, I have to like be like, man, we got to get these shots, so I know you're testing, I know you're doing the stuff. And over the years too, we've kind of, one of the first things I do at these photo shoots is like, or the day before, or talking to the team, my team contact is, okay, they're not testing suspension this day, right? This is just a photo shoot. And they're
Mhm.
like, yep, you've got them for 5 hours. I'm like, okay,
Right.
perfect. Because when, in the past, people have been like, oh, you can just shoot them while they're testing. I'm like, doesn't work. You want those killer shots. It has to be controlled.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, once you've dealt with that for 25 some years,
Yeah.
shooting photos at an adventure ride probably seems crazy, but it's probably not crazy compared to that.
Yeah. I mean, I still take it seriously. And when I want to come back and go and look at the library of photos we get from a trip,
Yeah.
and video clips and drone clips and GoPro clips, and I collate them all. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a good amount of quality stuff. So sometimes on these trips, like to Costa Rica, the first day we were there, I'm like, we're riding and riding, and I'm not seeing anything. I'm like, man, I got to get these shots. And Greece was the same too. We came out of Athens and we're lane splitting on this busy road, and we finally get out to this coastline, and he's like, hey, here's a shot. And I'm like, looking, I'm like, okay, I don't really see it. I'm in my head, I'm like, man, is it going to be like this the whole time, or are we going to go somewhere else? So you've got that sort of feeling of like, what's it going to be like tomorrow and the day after and the day after? And are we going to come back with enough stuff, or am I going to have to email people and say, hey, it didn't really work out this trip? So it's
Yes.
stressful.
When you're the content guy, you're generally the thing that most people are having fun with. It's like this is the way I feel when I'm hosting a banquet, right? For 99% of the people that are in that banquet, they're there to have fun. This is the chance to drink beers and blow off steam. But for me and like 12 other people, it's actual work, right? So
Yeah.
for the majority of the people on these rides with you, they're just having fun.
Yeah. Right.
You got to be
Right.
the business guy,
Yeah. And
unfortunately.
and
Yeah.
like you say, you're like, we're ripping along some trail. I'm like, okay, stop, everyone.
Yeah.
And I got to get my backpack off and get my camera
Yeah.
out. And I'm like, okay, we're going to fly the drone. Okay, you got, and it's all of a sudden it's 25 minutes later, you're putting your stuff
Yep.
away and moving on. So that 25 minutes gets tacked on to the end of the day, So if you thought you're getting to the hotel at 5:30, now you're getting there at almost 6, and
Yep.
you multiply that by 6 or 8 stops, and now you're getting there at 9 o'clock and it's dark, you know.
Well, I'm pumped for you, man. It sounds like you
Yeah,
found,
thanks.
and look, adventure bikes are probably the best solution, and that's what you found. Yeah, so I don't know, 2015, 2016, did you see this down the road, or were you, there was a time where you were like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do?
Well, that was like compounding my feeling of stress, you know. I'm like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm killing myself.
Yeah.
And I was literally like on the edge. I mean, you and I knew, right? We talked over
Oh
the
yeah,
years,
yeah.
but I was like,
I think you and I, honestly, just being honest, you and I had to back away from each other
yeah,
because it was getting, the work was getting tough for me, and it was getting tough for you. And I
yeah,
think we were arguing probably for the wrong reasons, probably because we were burned out. It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah. We were
personal.
just, it was just the pressure of
Exactly,
the deadline, and
exactly.
um, yeah, I know we had a couple of conversations, and but
Yeah.
it was just that was what the time was like, you know.
Yes.
And then back then I was like, man, if I'm making good money, but I don't really want to do this anymore in this capacity, you know,
Mhm.
at this level.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? And that kind of was stressing me out too, you know. So when I sort of discovered adventure bikes, that and I really fell in love with it, you know. Like I say, you're ripping down a fire road in Baja, and there's cactus going by, and you're with your friends, and you stop at a hotel that night on the beach, and you drink a Pacifico, and you know, it's like,
Yeah.
man, how can I monetize this? You know.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Yes.
Yeah, but it turns out a lot of people want to do that, and if you can show them that, then they're interested in it, you know. So, and then you realize, okay, there's brands that support that dream of everyone, you know, like the bag companies and the tire companies and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad it worked out for you, right? And it's only going to get bigger that the way that market is going. There's no doubt
Yeah,
about that. Yep.
but
Awesome.
I have
Mhm.
no expectation, you know. I'm just, it's a good place to be, where I'm like, we'll just see what happens, you know. I'm not stressed about the future, and we'll just see what happens, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, we could go on here forever. I'm sure the COVID thing was a boost because people are trying to get out. Like it
Yeah,
just seems like the future is really bright. But yeah, you're not planning it. You're just you'll be there.
yeah,
It
I'll
seems
be
that
there
way.
in some capacity or other, yeah, for sure.
All right, thanks for chatting, mate. We don't see each other at the race as much, but it seems like you're in a really good spot. So hey, I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah,
Yep,
I really appreciate the support, Jason. And, you
yep.
know, like I said earlier, the RacerX team, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for you guys. So, yeah, I mean, I've always felt like I'm part of the RacerX family. And Davey's told me I've got a job for life there. So we'll see if that's true or not. But
Hey, well, you can tell me you're on our podcast. So there you go. You did
yeah,
something.
I did some work today. Come
There
on.
you go. There you go. Yeah, it's the way this industry works, and I always praise Davey for that. I mean, from day one, Davey was like literally, I walked in the door and he's like, "I need you to work for this GNCC series, and we need someone to do the photos and writing for Cycle News, and they'll pay you."
Yeah.
I think I might have gotten a Cycle News check before I got a check from the Coombs actually, and it has been symbiotic, freelance Racer X, and they like meld together, right?
Yeah,
You probably
definitely.
wouldn't get one thing without the other. They're all super intertwined, and it's the whole industry kind of understands like it's a pretty small sport, right? It's just the way it has to be. No one is unfortunately is paying anybody. Maybe Eli Tomac's paycheck is big enough where he doesn't need to do anything else on the side,
Yeah.
but for the
Yeah.
rest of us, you kind of have to do it that way.
Yeah. And it worked out well for me. I mean, you know, I feel like I did the work, but the
Mhm.
fact that I had a place to place my work. I mean, I remember the first outdoors I shot for Racer X was, I think, 99 at Glen Helen when Tortelli won.
Oh,
And Davey's like, yeah, you're the only guy shooting. So I delivered all these images, and you guys made I don't know, 10 spreads of photos. And I got that thing. I'm like, man, this is like, I was like blown away by the support from you guys. So yeah,
and
it's
then
been
that
really,
leads to other clients, I'm sure.
yeah.
Right.
Once the
Yeah.
people know my name
Yep.
because of Racer X, for sure.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. It helps. And then you become an insider, which helps us, vice versa. Just the way this
yeah,
industry has to
yeah,
be.
yeah,
All right.
for
Good for
sure.
you, mate. Thanks for the
Yeah.
time. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks very much. And maybe we'll go on a ride sometime together.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, dude, when I heard about that Triumph ride and all, I mean, everything you've mentioned on this, I'm like, I would love to do it.
Yeah,
I'm still probably 4 or 5 years away from that stage where like it's either kids
yeah,
or making a
right.
paycheck at the races.
Yeah.
I can't wait to that stage of life where I'm like, hey, I'm going to take 5 days to ride with my buddies. Fortunately, I'm not quite there yet, but I will get there.
Okay, awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Simon. Have a good one,
Thanks.
man.
Yeah,
Good to see
cheers.
you.
See ya.